Frustration is mounting and anger is growing with the liberals and passive politicians. Learn the playbook of those who are trying to destroy our country. From the blue-collar professor, he teaches, he leads, he speaks out for truth and justice. Now, the educator of all things conservative, your host.
The leader in talk radio on the internet, right here on K98Talk.com.
Is debt beating you down? You need discipline. You need the Debt Ninja. If you've been caught in a financial trap and need to be set free, then you need the Debt Ninja. Want to stop those harassing collection calls, start saving thousands in interest and fees, and get out of debt fast? Then you need to call the Debt Ninja. The Debt Ninja will find the best companies across the country that will help you consolidate all your bills into one easy payment, reduce your payments by 30 to 50%, and get you out of debt fast. If you have unsecured debt of $10,000 or more, such as credit cards, loans, or medical bills, call the Debt Ninja for a free 15-minute consultation.
Call 800-826-1246. 800-826-1246. That's 800-826-1246. Call today.
The Debt Ninja.
This is Slickery Trigger for Rebel Road Tactical. With proper care and feeding, your pistol will be ready when you need it. There to save your life. Shouldn't your gear be that good? Whether you need a holster for comfortable everyday carry or a tough-as-nails holster for your next training course, Rebel Road Tactical has what you need. Check us out on the web at rebelroadtactical.com.
Tired of paying outrageous prices for Viagra? Well, we have great news for you. Now you can finally get Viagra at huge discounts. Healthy Man allows you to save up to $500 on Viagra. Why pay U.S. pharmacy prices of $15 per pill or more when you can get Viagra for less than $3 a pill? Call today and get 40 Viagra pills for only $99. This can cost as much as $600 at your local pharmacy. You can't afford not to call us. If you want Viagra at the lowest prices, never pay $15 a pill pharmacy prices again. Get Viagra for less than $3 a pill. Call 1-800-516-7602 today and save up to $500 and get 40 pills for just $99. Healthy Man is fast, easy, and affordable. Operators are waiting at 1-800-516-7602 to take your call right now. Call 1-800-516-7602. That's 1-800-516-7602. Again, 1-800-516-7602.
In these uncertain economic times, you've got to do whatever you can to save money. One of our biggest expenses can be our cars, especially when unexpected repair bills hit. Not anymore. If you own a vehicle with less than 130,000 miles, is less than 12 years old, has a warranty about to expire, or even no warranty at all, you could stop paying for car repairs. Roadside assistance, towing, and rental coverage are all included. Don't wait for the next repair. Make one free call right now to see if you qualify. If your vehicle is less than 12 years old, has less than 130,000 miles, even if it's out of warranty, paying for car repairs can become a thing of the past. Call us right now and get your car protected before your next repair bill hits. Get protection and no more repair bills. Call 800-696-1030. Again, 800-696-1030. That's 800-696-1030. 800-696-1030.
All right, folks, this is Rick Robinson with you. I want to tell you about some friends of mine from a company called Security Enforcement Specialists. When I ran my security agency for 12 years, I worked with one of these partners on a daily basis. He's been involved in this agency now, and with his other partner, they do have over 30 years of experience in the private security industry. If you own a business, and you need someone to keep you or your customers or residents safe, then I highly recommend contacting Security Enforcement Specialists today. Give them a call at 405-703-1796. Again, that's 405-703-1796. Again, tell them Rick from K98 Talk sent you. Like I said, if you need the help, they are here for you, so make sure that you go look them up, check them out, and see what they can do.
Wrong way. Welcome to the place. Welcome.
Individuals and businesses with tax problems, listen carefully. Do you feel like you're losing control over your finances? If you owe over $10,000 in back taxes or have unfiled tax returns, we can help you take back control. The IRS is the largest and most aggressive collection agency in the world, and they can seize your bank account, garnish your paycheck, close your business, and file criminal charges. Take control of your tax problems now by calling the experts at Tax Mediation Services and take advantage of the Fresh Start program and new laws that may allow us to negotiate a settlement for the lowest amount possible. Our team of tax attorneys and enrolled agents can stop collections and get you protected so you can take control of your financial future. Tax Mediation Services is accredited by the Better Business Bureau. Call now for a free case review and a price protection guaranteed quote.
Call Tax Mediation Services now at 800-610-9050. That's 800-610-9050. 800-610-9050.
The Internet will never be the same. You're listening to K98Talk.com.
Wow. Good God, y'all. What is it good for? Absolutely.
Host, Dr. Gavin Mitchell.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to it, the Thursday edition of the program. Boy, the wheels are falling off in Philadelphia, aren't they? I mean, you talk about convention shambles. It started out with the American flag not even being present in the convention center to them magically appearing day two. And it goes on and on. But I hope I don't disappoint you, because we are going to have to save all of our convention talk for tomorrow's program, because I have a very special show today. It's a show that's going to lend itself more to the academic side of you, the side that really wants to know what is going on. What is the truth behind all this mess? And before we get into that, I want to send a special thanks to Matt Locke for taking care of the show yesterday. It's an honor to have such a talented guy be available to you when you need to step away for a day or so. And of course, I'm available to him. We've done it before, but what a great show. What a great guy. And if you haven't had the opportunity, get out there, themattlockshow.com, and at Matt Locke Show is where he's at on Twitter. So special thanks to Matt. Man, that it's awesome to have friends like that. I simply think he's one of the best out there. So I got a phone call from Ron Phillips, my executive producer, 2 days ago. Yeah, 2 days ago. And Ron said, hey, I know you don't do interviews. We don't do interviews. We used to, we've stopped doing them, and there's a reason we've stopped doing them. We've stopped doing them because everywhere you turn on the radio or everywhere, every TV channel you turn on, it's the same thing. It's the same guy saying the same thing over and over again, or it's somebody who has absolutely no credentials to speak on what they're speaking to. And I've had enough of that. You know, you can get that somewhere else if that's what you want. What I want to do with this program, and what you were responding to, and very well, and thank you for that, is the fact that we have a conversation. We hit on topics that matter, and we have a dialogue. I don't go out there and try to use $5 words. I don't try to impress with, well, listen to all these sound clips that I'm in from the press. And I'm not taking a shot at anybody. I'm just saying that's not what it's about. I'm an ordinary, hardworking guy, just like you are, although you may not be a guy. You may be a gal, so an ordinary, hardworking gal. We're just a couple people having a conversation about what's going on. It just happens to be my passion. And that's why we don't do interviews. But to bring this full circle, Ron gave me a call and said, I really think you need to consider this interview. I said, what? He said, Charles Ortel would like to get the word out, and he's agreed to come onto the show. Okay. So I'll start doing some research. The first place I end up is dailycaller.com. And I'm blown away. The headline is exclusive. IRS launches investigation of Clinton Foundation. I thought, oh my gosh. And it has Charles Ortel quoted in there. I thought, oh, wow. Okay. All right. And so I start digging on Charles Ortel. I've heard the name, and I found out where I heard the name. But I had heard the name before, but this guy is sharp. He is a Harvard MBA holder. He earned an MBA from Harvard. He got his bachelor degree from Yale, and he has been a managing partner on Wall Street for years. Retired early, came out of retirement to bring down GE and expose them for what was going on. Went back into retirement, kind of wrote for a while here and there, still does. And he decided to dig on Hillary Clinton. There is nobody more qualified. There are some out there equally qualified. And remember, my education is in finance. I sat down with Mr. Ortel, with Charles Ortel, and we discussed it. I asked him about his background. I asked him about GE and why he went after, what his conclusion was, to prove that he's unbiased. He lets the facts lead him where he wants to. And then we got into the whole Clinton Foundation. It is an incredible discussion. It's not one of those bombs exploding in the background, all that guy's so funny conversations. It was a very serious adult conversation about the Clinton Foundation from someone, listening to someone who has spent 18 months digging into it and the conclusions they have come to. And it's not like this is, it's easy to discard the Clinton cash story because that was a journalist trying to play finance guy. This is a finance guy. He knows the business better than anybody, inside and out. He has been successful. He gets it. And he took his educated and experienced eyes and laid them on this whole Clinton Foundation spectacle. And his conclusions are mind-blowing. I sat down with Mr. Ortel earlier today to have this conversation. Joining us on the program is Charles Ortel. Charles, thank you for joining us tonight. I sure do appreciate your time. How are you, sir?
Thanks for having me on. I'm delighted to be on, Gavin.
Well, the pleasure is mine, sir, and this is why. I received a phone call from Ron Phillips, my producer, and he mentioned your name and that you had some information you wanted to get out. And this was a day or two ago, and at that point, the, quote, information hadn't been made public. And so there were questions about, well, what's the proper timing? Well, since then, the story's broken. And I think we're safe to have this conversation. When I started digging, the answer was absolutely yes. I would love to have this conversation with Charles. When can we do it? The sooner, the better. And so I sure do appreciate you coming on. But if you could you tell our listeners a little bit about your background leading up to the situation we're going to discuss?
Sure, I'll be quick. But a simple way to tell the story is I'm the eldest of three boys. I'm 60 years old. My father is still alive. My mother and father were highly educated people. My father is a PhD in nuclear physics. My mother was one of the world's experts on Johann Sebastian Bach, the musician. I did not have an excuse for doing poorly in school. And my parents impressed upon me, being the eldest of three boys, that I really had to, do well. So, and I fortunately enjoy learning. I try to find something new to learn every day, and that makes my life very happy. So, and I was fortunate to get into Yale College, and then from there directly into Harvard Business School, and I lucked out and went to Wall Street in June of 1980. When Wall Street was very much in disarray, and when a lot of people, between me and the senior partners of the small firm that I started working in 1980, called Dillon Reed, a lot of those people ultimately left in the turmoil. And then the economy, the Reagan Revolution worked, and mergers and acquisitions started really taking off, and leveraged buyouts. And so at a very young age, I was doing billion-dollar deals, leading billion-dollar deals in my early 20s, mid-20s. And before long, I was put in charge of Dillon Reed's worldwide merger and acquisition business at the tender age of about 32. I ended up in this period looking ahead and seeing the credit crisis coming. The short version of the story is that I predicted it, And not only did I predict it, I identified a company that everybody thought was in good shape, which I felt was in very bad shape, and that was General Electric. And General Electric is an extremely complicated company even now. I looked at it by chance. I actually expected, I hadn't looked at their financial statements. I hadn't looked at anything in business for about 3 or 4 years. And I thought I should form a view about whether the market was under or overvalued. So I tore apart 25 large multinational companies, thinking that their finances would be better than smaller companies. And I said, I really should take a look at GE. And what I saw terrified me and caused me to actually question my sanity. I mean, how could I think that GE was in such bad shape when so many people thought it was in great shape? So I steeled up my courage, and I came back into the city after really 5 years of not interacting much with people in business, and went to some powerful friends, and I said, listen, we got some really serious trouble here. We've got a global geopolitical mess. We've got decades of excess in the financial system, too much debt. We've got companies with horrible financial results, and people believe GE is strong when it's not. But one thing led to another, and saving you the long version of the story, I was asked to go on Bloomberg Television in September 16th, 2008, the very day that the federal government, or the U.S. government, working with the Federal Reserve, seized AIG, and the day after, I think, or the weekend after, Lehman blew up. And I got up there on Pim Fox's show, Taking Stock, and when he was doing that show, and I said, everybody thinks that we're through the worst of it. In reality, GE's in terrible shape, and GE was not very happy with me. But I was quickly proven correct. A number of weeks later, the same host had me on, and it was just the very day that Warren Buffett decided to invest in GE, and he asked me, he'd asked me the previous week, I didn't like GE, who else didn't I like? And I said, I didn't like Warren Buffett. And the reason I don't like him even now is I think his record is very good, wonderful from 1965 to about 1998 or so, but I think it's far more difficult to replicate early success with mammoth piles of assets and big positions around the world, and he hasn't done that.
Right. He moves the market, and others follow and things of that nature. Sure. We're talking with Mr. Charles Ortel here on the Gavin Mitchell Show. Now, Charles, what that for those that enjoy finance and the moving and shaking in the markets and all the players, they're enthralled. I'm enthralled. We could have this conversation all week long, and I wouldn't go anywhere. But I ask all of that to set this up, because that's not why you're here today. It helps lead to it, but that's not why you and I are having this conversation today. But what it did prove to me is that, one, you obviously have the wherewithal, the understanding, the education, and experience to make unbiased judgments on companies. And to parlay that, the GE situation was not a popular choice. That wasn't a popular position to take at the time, but you looked at the facts and drew your own conclusion and planted your flag. And to me, that kind of lays the foundation for where we're headed now in our conversation. So the news broke, I want to say Tuesday, I believe, late Tuesday afternoon, if I'm correct, that the IRS has decided to launch an investigation into the Clinton Foundation. And your name has popped up all over the place with this. They are calling you the next Harry Markoopoulos, if I'm pronouncing his name right. And who he is he is the guy that pounded the SEC saying, you need to check out Madoff. Something's not right here. Something's shady here. And they eventually checked out Madoff. So he was kind of the guy that tipped them off. They're comparing you to him with the Hillary Clinton Foundation. First off, is that fair?
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's an insult to Markoopoulos, because he really did. He was in the wilderness for many, many years on that. I mean, he I've seen the movie and I've read about him and all that, and he really, spent a lot of time on it. I've only spent 18 months on this. And let me just explain why.
Well, that was my next question. Why would you, a Yale and Harvard educated man who has had great success on Wall Street, why would you take the time to, where if I'm interpreting what you're telling me, you're doing okay financially, right? I don't know that you would necessarily, or let me rephrase that. I don't know that I would necessarily have skin in the game at this point, right? I might be on the beach, like you said, drinking a Mai Tai or whatever the case is, and let Hillary Clinton do what Hillary Clinton does. So why would you, in your position, take 18 months or more to invest into getting to the bottom of this situation?
Well, thanks for the question. So I mean, first of all, I just think it's the right thing to do. I have the training to do this, and I had the time to do it, and it interests me. But there is a venal answer. And, I see a business opportunity, generally speaking, not because of the Clinton Foundation per se, but a business opportunity. I believe that inside this great country, and I'm one of these, sappy fools, let's say, who actually believes America is exceptional across the political spectrum, that there are good people on the far left and good people on the far right, good people in the middle, who are all fortunate to live in one of the greatest countries in the known history of this planet. And so I feel like by training in life, I'm able to express judgments on how wealth should be managed. I think because of my experience as a trustee and for two small charities, I'm now, especially given the recent work, able to have points of view on what constitutes an interesting charity and what is one you should avoid. And I'm also somebody who really believes that the history of this great country since about 1970 has not been told properly, that the major universities have been infected by the Bill Clintons and the Hillary Clintons and the people like that who now control these academic institutions and are twisting our history apart beyond fair recognition, and that ordinary Americans who live and work and meet payroll and know something of their own families and their grandparents and their great-grandparents understand, whatever your racial background, whatever your political background, this is a special place, and it should be revered. So I saw, the episode of going into, I've now done it with GE, and now going into a complex situation in the Clinton Foundation that a friend of mine, who actually just wrote a book, Jerry Corsi, it's very kind and mentioned me in it. I went to Jerry Corsi last year, excuse me, with my preliminary conclusions, and I said, look, what I see here in this charity, it's the biggest unprosecuted criminal fraud charity I've ever seen in history.
Now, that's a bold statement to say that. Let me ask you this. There are going to be a lot of people out there who say, look, here's one of these guys they talk about, one of the wealthy Wall Street guys attacking the Clintons. It's what they do. It's politically driven. What's your response to that?
Well, a couple of responses. In the first instance, I would say that Wall Street owns Hillary Clinton. There's a reason that Hillary Clinton is not revealing the content of her speeches to the various Wall Street and large investment firm patrons who have feathered the nests of the Clintons ever since January 20th, 2001, if not previously. So, that's a bit rich saying that, I'm part of the Wall Street crowd of the people who are promoting her and hoping that she'll be president. I mean, the big Wall Street firms. I never worked for a big Wall Street firm. I worked for small partnerships that were run the old-fashioned way, that believed Dillon Read was a fine firm. Some great senior partners taught me well. A man has since passed away, Peter Flanagan. He's a fantastic human being. He never had to work a day in his life. He was one of the hardest working people you'd ever meet. Brilliant man. Wide experience around the world. Nick Brady did not have the same academic training, but he was the Secretary of the Treasury. He was the chairman of the firm when I was there. Some real inspirations taught me there is such thing as right and wrong in the world and in finance. And, of course, that was a message that I grew up hearing here at home. So in the first instance, I'm not saying this and I'm not being coy. I have zero interest in politics. I'm 60, as I mentioned. I believe, I'm not sure of this number, but in all the years of having been asked to contribute to politicians, I believe the sum total of money that I've given is $2,000. I hate giving money to politicians. I don't see the point of it. Whether I have chiefly given to the few people I gave money to, or they were Republicans. The Republican Party left me a long time ago. I'm conservative economically. I'm open-minded socially. I do not like big bureaucracies. I see both parties as dysfunctional bureaucracies that are engaged, it would seem, in assisted suicide. I mean, it's crazy land what both parties are doing. It's become a uniparty. So while I do have two children, I have a son and a daughter, and I'm here in New York, so I'm very familiar with the Clintons. I'm very familiar with their escapades. I have a great friend who is one of the Clintons' worst nightmares, and that's a fine woman named Kathleen Willey. Perhaps you may know her.
Yeah.
And she and I speak almost daily, and I became in touch with her a number of years ago when a mutual friend was kind enough to introduce me to her, and I just found her history of being a loyal Democrat and finding herself in deep financial distress, and then going into the president and reputedly when he was in the White House and she was a volunteer, and suffering what she suffered and having her husband kill himself that day. I mean, those experiences tend to shade your view of a family, and not just the Bill, but of the family around Bill. So I'm very vocal in the fact that I think the Clintons are not a role model in any way, and that they should not be allowed anywhere near the White House. But that's not why I did this. I did this because the Clinton Foundation, to me, I wrote a report on my site, and everything on my site's free. So you go to www.charleswortell.com. There's a report I called the First Foundation Report, the 20th of April, 2015, where I hadn't reached the conclusions that I subsequently reached, but I framed the issues. And the good people who listen to your podcast and the bulk of Americans are the most generous people on earth. In fact, when you look, there are good statistics that you can get from our government in what's called the Consumer Expenditure Survey. It's very good for the period 2004 to 2014. It's consistent. And it shows you by income quintile how much money they earn, what taxes they pay, and how they spend their money. And what that data shows is that the bottom 80% of Americans are by far and away the most generous with charity, more generous than the rich in terms of what share they give of their income. And the bottom 80% in this country, sadly, has no financial wealth to speak of. So it's the bottom 80% in this country who contribute so much to charity. Oftentimes those statistics are skewed by the large number of religious people who tithe in various forms to their charities. Those tithes or religious contributions are included. But when you think about all that, people in this country, I think the round number is that they give about $200 billion, $300 billion a year to charity. And it comes in $5 here and $20 there and $100 there and $600. It's not Bill Gates. I mean, he does give a lot of money, but it's good people in America. They give money. They hear about a disaster, and no matter how bad their own lives may be, if it's Katrina or the tsunami or 9/11 or up here Hurricane Sandy up in our area, money comes flooding in, and not enough people actually check the forms of the charity. And unfortunately, what happens is the fraudsters around the world know about this. They know that their people can be gullible, and large sums of money can start flowing towards a so-called good cause.
Sure, but Charles, I don't mean to interrupt you, but this is, I hear you saying that, and I've also heard you say it was about right and wrong, but that's with the presumption of the outcome, right? Being right or wrong, because you didn't know necessarily what you were going to find was what you categorized as criminal. And there are plenty of charities out there that could be investigated. Like, why or what was it that made you pull the Clinton Foundation filings and start to research? What was that event or that thought or that happening?
Well, what happened was that when I first started hearing about the Clinton Foundation, I would hear these reports about how George H.W. Bush and President Clinton had gotten together on tsunami and wasn't that wonderful. And I heard these reports about how Bill Clinton was fighting HIV/AIDS and wasn't that wonderful. And, it sounded wonderful. And then I thought, I really haven't looked closely at these charity reports. What do they tell anybody who wants to look at them? And I was amazed, actually, when I pulled, for the first time, the Clinton Foundation filings. This was back in the February 2015 timeframe. It took me about 30 days to figure out this was a fraud. And once I figured out it was a fraud, and once I figured out that the Clintons weren't going to admit it was a fraud, and once I figured out that it really needed to be exposed, I figured I better really study this in a way that very few other people could study. See, the problem with most charities is that the primary regulator of any American charity is the state regulator in the home state of the charity. That would be Arkansas. Arkansas today is really controlled politically by Republicans, actually, but it doesn't have. It's not. Doesn't have gigantic bureaucracy. So, for the Arkansas government apparatus to figure out what's going on in each state where the Clinton operates, and they basically operate and solicit in all states and the District of Columbia, and then in every country is a mammoth job. There isn't a regulator out there. So when I saw this and when I realized that the Clintons would do what the Clintons did, use their supposed involvement with this charity as an argument for why they're good people, they should be trusted, I realized I'd be taking on some pretty powerful people, and I better be sure of my ground. So I spent the last last 18 months or so, but going over this stuff, checking things, triple checking, talking to experts, being really sure of my ground. The interesting thing about charity fraud that is very different than Enron, which is, or securities fraud or private fraud, is that the world of charities is regulated by legal traditions in this country and in many countries that used to be part of the British Empire by ancient English legal tradition that actually goes all the way back to Roman law. And the concept of charity is a noble endeavor. I mean, it's not, this isn't a new idea. People were doing charity long, long ago. In 1601, one of the last acts of Queen Elizabeth, the first Queen Elizabeth, was to see to it that the English, you could say British, legal tradition of charities was codified into a statute in 1601. And that statute is the basis in this country, scholars will tell you, for what is deemed to be a charity. And the fact that you operate in healthcare does not necessarily mean that you're doing charitable work. And this statute helps you think that through. Case law helps you think that through. Regulations help you think that through. So when you set up a charity, there's some very important things. You've got to come up with a specific purpose. You can't say that Gavin and Charles are going to do whatever. We're going to help the world. You just can't do that.
Right, and that goal has to be, to use a legal term, it has to be narrowly focused. It can't be overly broad, correct?
You're absolutely right. Absolutely
okay.
right. And what you're talking about is the tax-exempt purpose or purposes of the nonprofit corporation. They must, as you're absolutely right, they must be specific. They must be achievable. Your application must be credible. When you set up the nonprofit corporation, there's a little nuance most people don't understand, and that is you can have a nonprofit corporation that is not tax exempt. So just because you call yourself a nonprofit, just because you qualify under state law as a nonprofit, does not mean the IRS has said you qualify as a tax exempt federally authorized charity.
So for clarification purposes, what you're saying is there are two thresholds for any, quote, nonprofit. There is the state threshold, which would allow you to call yourself nonprofit or not, and then there's the federal threshold, which would determine whether you were exempt from federal taxes on that revenue or the profit, rather.
Right, and,
okay.
And then it gets a lot more complicated. So the first step is form the nonprofit, typically a corporation. You don't necessarily have to set up a corporation, but most people do. Then you fill out the application to the IRS, and the application has to be truthful and accurate and complete. You can't leave material things out of it. Then the IRS will normally, they generally tinker with your application, then they approve it. Now you're only part of the way done. If let's say you're in Texas and you do this, I don't know that Texas regulates charities. They may or may not. But if you want to operate your Texas-based, federally authorized nonprofit in New York, and you want to solicit more than, I forget what the threshold number is, I believe it's $25,000, you want to come to my state and solicit for your charity, you got to do quite a few things. The first thing you have to do is you have to register your nonprofit corporation in my state here in New York. The next thing you have to do is you have to register to solicit it, particularly if you want to use a professional fundraiser. You've got to disclose who that person is, what the nature of the agreement is, what your objectives are, and you've got to fill out some exhaustive information. And then you have to file a report in this state. And if you want to do that in Georgia, you got to do the same thing. And it actually turns out that right now that I think it's more than 40 states require you to do that. Now, that's just if you want to operate inside the United States in Washington, D.C., which D.C. also has a strict rule. Then it gets even worse if you want to do international work. And international work is very different than U.S. work. International work, first of all, you have to contend with the fact that you're perhaps pulling in contributions from in other currencies and you're spending money in other currencies, so your financial statements are going to be a lot more complicated. The IRS knows about this. They know how tempting it might be to be sitting in New York and say, rather than paying for my trip to Normandy with after-tax money, why don't I set up a charity and say that I'm going to study Norman castles? The IRS is wise to that.
Right.
So they want to make sure that you're actually doing international work that can be controlled. And the strict rule on international charities is that all U.S.-formed international charities that operate internationally must be controlled, strictly, tightly controlled from a U.S. base. So you can't have a string of, crazy little investments around the world that you call them a charity. You're not allowed to do that. And this is where the Clinton Foundation falls badly down. The Clinton Foundation's stated purpose, which is very clear on the application.
You took my next question right out of my mouth. Please continue. That's exactly where I was headed. So,
all right. Sorry, and I'm sorry I probably talked too much. But,
no, I'm enthralled. Please. So the stated purpose. What did the Clintons state the purpose of the Clinton Foundation was?
The controlling legal authority, to use a phrase that comes up in Clinton history, the controlling authority for what a foundation or public charity is or is not is its articles of incorporation. It's not even really what they put in the application of the IRS. The articles of incorporation are crystal clear that this is to be a presidential archive within the meaning of a U.S. statute that defines what a presidential archive is, and it's very clear that a presidential archive is a repository for the records of the Clinton presidency. It's not, a roving, expanding tribute to Bill Clinton's life after he became president. It's supposed to be an archive for what happened during the Clinton presidency and a related research facility, research study facility about his presidency that was to be based in Little Rock, Arkansas. And that's all it's supposed to be from a tax-exempt purposes.
So in layman's terms, it was for his congressional libraries and the offshoots thereof.
His presidential library.
Right. I'm sorry. I say congressional. Presidential library and the offshoots thereof.
Right. And there is a statute. What happened was, I don't believe there is a George Washington library. At a certain moment in time, Congress got together and decided that there ought to be a real formal way of doing this. And the way that all the other recent presidential libraries have worked is that private parties come together and they say, listen, the government owns these records. They need to be housed in a building somewhere. Let's get some donors together and we'll build a campus somewhere, typically in league with another university or some other institution that's already there. And the National Archives has these records. And a deal is cut wherein the National Archives agree to basically take care of all these records in this new facility. And when the Clinton Foundation was erected, the rule was whatever the cost of the facility was, the donors had to pick that up, and then they had to provide the National Archives with an endowment equal to 20% the cost of the property. That's now more like 60%. So President Obama has a much bigger bar of fundraising than Bill Clinton did. And it's just very clear from the paperwork that, what the Clintons are really good at doing is showing you part of the picture, never the whole picture. But unfortunately, in charities, charities stand in the shoes of government. They are not private for-profit making operations. They're not investment funds. They're supposed to be standing in the shoes of government, which means they're not allowed to engage, quote, in any illegal activities.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Charles. We're talking with Charles Ortel here. And Charles, for the listeners that have been listening this whole time, I think we have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that you are among the qualified to take a look at this. You have a history of being objective and going where the facts take you. Case in point, the GE, quote, exposure. And you decided to take a look into the Clinton Foundation. And what we have set up to this point is the foundation was set up to help fund and operate the Clinton Presidential Library and any subsidiaries or cooperatives thereof. That was the stated purpose. But
No, let me stop you.
Okay.
Nothing about subsidiaries.
Nothing about subsidiaries. Okay.
No. It's only from a standpoint of tax-exempt purposes. You see, why would you have an IRS regulate your purpose if you could put in these sweeping provisions that in the private sector we do put into companies, right? You can't do that in a charity and regulate them. You have to limit the stated purposes. There are more than 1 million public charities in the U.S. right now. So there is an argument, why do we need the million in first? But on balance, the theory is that charitable activity is fantastic stuff, and if people want to get together and do good things and lessen the burden of government, that's good. So on balance, people on the right and the left are very happy to see more charities. But the way the IRS normally regulates is they say, all right, you got to pick a purpose, and unlike politics, and unlike investment funds that never make money for their investors, in the charity world, you have to pick purposes, and you actually have to achieve them. And once you get done achieving your purpose, you can go back to the IRS and you can say, well, listen, look at what we've done so far. Our next trick, we want to do this. Well, you can't start doing your next trick. You have to do only what you're authorized to do, pursue only the tax-exempt purposes that you were authorized to do, and then if you want to change, you go to the IRS and you say, you know what, we have this idea. Instead of doing a presidential library in Arkansas, now what we want to do is we want to fight HIV/AIDS all over the world.
Okay, have they amended that?
Never.
Okay, which brings me to probably my final question, because I have a feeling this is going to take some time to answer. So we know that's their stated purpose, and you have used the term criminal activity regarding this foundation. Give us some examples of why and how you can make that statement with confidence.
All right. Very simply, if you go to the Clinton Foundation website, which is their principal information portal, and in the internet age, basically what charities do is they put their key information online. And you will see that at first blush it looks like these people are really diligent. They put tax filings online from 1998 to the present, and then they have puff pieces, I would call them, whether it was the Clintons or anybody else. They're just marketing pieces, which are called annual reports from 2004 to present. For a charity above a very small size, back in 1998, I forget what the exact number was. Let's just say it was $500,000 in revenue, because the Clinton Foundation has never been close to only $500,000 in revenue. Very safely, it had to get an audit in its first year. They have not provided on their site. They've omitted from their site the audits in quotes, that they procured from a small firm for the period 23 October 1997, when the thing was organized in Arkansas, through the period 31 December 2004. There are no audits on the site. But, unfortunately, the Clintons forgot that they needed to register in all these states, and the states keep copies of the audits. When you get the audits for this crucial period, they opened the Presidential Center. They achieved their first purpose of getting a center up and running on the 18th of November 2004. So for this crucial period, when the thing was built, there are the audits that are hidden. They're not on the Clinton website, but are in certain states, and anybody can find them, say categorically, these financial statements are prepared using accounting principles which are not allowed within the United States of America. Flat, bold. It's their own accountant saying it. The trustees have decided to use accounting principles for a U.S. activity that are not allowed in the United States of America.
So are they using the international standards?
No. They're using their mumbo-jumbo standards. They're supposed to have, those of us with experience in construction understand that when you solicit money for an entity that has no controls, where the trustees are all Democrat Clinton insiders. Terry McAuliffe, for example, was an important trustee, and he had lent money to the Clintons in 1999 to buy the house in Chappaqua. He was chairman of the Democrat National Party in 2004, and in this period when the center was built, there are no controls, there are no external people, and there's no audits and no cash flow statement. This is for an entity that's engaged in a massive construction project. And then when you look carefully, as anybody trained in accounting can do, at these financial statements, you see that in the crucial year 2004, tens of millions of dollars was diverted from this foundation exercise, both in the construction and in the false and materially misleading in which they account for the monies that they borrowed from three institutions during 2004.
When you say diverted, what do you mean?
I mean that in double entry accounting, which is what people use in America when they're running things properly, you have an income statement and you have a balance sheet. The income statement measures for a charity. The key measure is the difference in the supposed change in net assets. And it's a concept. There is no profit in a charity, but it's akin to a profit. The expenses, your revenues, your inflows, less your outgoes, or the change in net assets. The calculation on the income statement must agree with the calculation on the balance sheet, which is further reconciled with the cash flow statement. And beginning back, I think in 1993, it was required for charities to have, I think it was 93, it might have been 93 or 7, but certainly by the time the Clinton Foundation started, it had to produce a statement of activities, which is like an income statement, a statement of financial position, which is like a balance sheet, and a cash flow statement, using American accounting principles. It did not use accounting principles that are allowed inside the U.S. It did not produce a cash flow statement, and the numbers don't add up.
The numbers do not add up.
And anybody who understands basic accounting can see this.
And this isn't just the information the Clinton Foundation has made available to the public. These are their actual filings?
Yeah. No, actually, this is information the Clinton Foundation has tried to hide from the public. The fact that these audits, that the audits for a charity above a certain size, it must provide the annual tax return, complete tax return, with one exception. The only exception that a charity does not have to provide to the public is the identities of its donors. It does not have to name the identities of its donors to the public, but it does have to give that information to the IRS.
So
everything else.
I'm sorry, please. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's right. So on the tax filings for a charity above a certain size, actually they're pretty well designed. I'll tip my hat to the IRS. They're very clever questions. And by reading these questions and reading the Clinton Foundation answers, each tax filing is submitted to the IRS and then in turn is submitted to every regulating state and foreign body under penalties of perjury that the information in that tax return is true and accurate. So for the first period, for the foundation, during which time they abandoned their stated purpose to do international purposes for which they weren't approved, they failed to produce the kind of accounting that was required. Money was diverted. It's obvious it was diverted. We just don't know to whom. And that's now you're only into 2004. Then after 2004, the scale of this thing internationally became gigantic. And I began last year to compare. I was able to figure out who some of the big donors were to the Clinton Foundation. They don't identify them by name in the foundation filings, but the donors have to make filings. And when you look at the donor filings carefully, you can figure out that the amounts of money the donors say they sent to the Clinton Foundation are far larger than the amounts of money the Clinton Foundation claims it received. And there are no good explanations for the differences.
Why, just so the Clinton Foundation isn't giving us an answer. With your experience and your education, what would be a reason for doing that? Why would you fudge the numbers in a downward movement? Why would you do that?
Because you're stealing the money.
Ah, okay.
And so the issue here, the very interesting thing, I have healthy respect for the accounting profession, and accounts get together and they write memos that would quickly put most people to sleep. So I promise I won't go at length through this memo. But there's one memo that's really worthwhile, which is called Considerations of Fraud in Financial Statement Reporting. That's the actual title of the memo. And it lists out red flags and explanations for signs that point to fraud. Now, if you think of most people around who are listening to this, if they're still listening and not sleeping, will understand that whether it's a charity or a business, you tend to keep track of your biggest donors or customers. So it's a bright red warning flag for fraud. If the numbers that a donor claims it sent to a charity are different than the numbers that you put in your books, and it's really a red flag if they're lower, because that means the donor. So the biggest donor to the Clinton Foundation, according to its books, is an entity supported primarily by governments based in Switzerland that has given, according to its books, more than $600 million to the Clinton Foundation out of a total intake declared by the Clinton Foundation of about $2 billion. That's a large amount of money to come from one place. And in key years, this entity was formed in September of 2006 as a consortium supported by numerous governments. The most important donor is France, the government of France. And all this money is most of the money is taken from airline ticket. It's sort of like it's not a tax, it's a voluntary assessment from airline tickets of cooperating governments. The Gates Foundation has given this thing less than $100 million, which is a lot of money, but it's not much for them, and was centrally involved in this thing. And the ostensible role of this entity, which has no ability to dole money out itself to the intended recipients, is to work with charities that are well established around the world and catering to the poorest of the world's poor already with existing programs. And the Clinton Foundation illegally held itself out as authorized to do this work. And in the key early period of this entity's formation, 2006, 7, and 8, when I believe Hillary Clinton began by 7 and 8 to run for president the first time, the amounts declared by Unitaid, this is the name of the entity, Unitaid, as going towards the Clinton Foundation are at least $100 million more than the Clinton Foundation claims it received. What happened to that money?
Now, let me ask you this, Charles, as we begin to wrap up here. What role, if any, did you play in, I'm going to use the term convincing loosely, the IRS to pursue this? Were you active in contacting them? Did you just scream loud enough that they couldn't turn their head? Why are all the media outlets tying you to this investigation the IRS says it plans to launch?
Well, I wrote an article for Breitbart March 16th, 2015, and it had a title that probably got the IRS's attention, which said, with so many red flags, why isn't the IRS auditing the Clinton Foundation? Now, for those who are familiar with the metrics of articles, I'm actually all right with numbers, and I have more I can write, but I'm not a natural writer. So I learned writing, journalism or opinion writing anyway, by doing it. I did some columns for the Washington Times and for some other people. And for this type of a topic, it's not like writing about entertainment or something fun. You don't get that many Facebook shares for an article on this dense a topic. So you'd be very happy normally with 500 Facebook shares or 1,000 Facebook shares. I just checked this article, which is over, it's now 17 months old. As of this, just moments ago, it has 75,000 Facebook shares. So, and that's been out there since last March, 2015. So that, and the fact that I've been very, consistently asking questions, going to people, asking people to investigate it, and I just feel it's important. I think that the charitable world, particularly those American charities that operate internationally, we can't have a president, former president of the United States, and somebody trying to be president associated with a presidential charity that is this badly mismanaged without correcting the record. We just can't do that as a country.
Yeah, sir, you were preaching to the choir there. Now, unlike the Clinton cash, what do I want to call it? The Clinton Cash Project.
Right.
That was a journalist trying to delve into financials and, quote, follow the money and tie the politics to that. You were actually a financial guy that used your expertise and experience to follow the cash and are trying to put it into words out there, which you have honed your skill over. Your writing's incredible, but I just want to point out the fact that you're not just a journalist who happens to be a finance guy part-time. You are a finance man through and through. And if anybody can understand these, it's you. Now, with this investigation, with the IRS investigation, how strong is this case? I know you're passionate about it, but my gosh, I heard the FBI director spell out a case for gross negligence in the email situation, to the point where Rudy Giuliani said, hey, I'm a reasonable prosecutor, and this is a slam dunk case. I'll take it. Right. But nothing happened. So how airtight is this?
Well, I mean, it's airtight. And so the approach that I and other people I've consulted took many months ago is we looked at this and we said, this is going to embarrass a lot of people. It's going to embarrass the Obama administration. It's going to embarrass the Bush family. It's going to embarrass Republicans. It's going to embarrass Democrats. It's going to embarrass certainly the Clintons. So there will be a tendency inside this country to try to cover it up. So as was the case with GE, which if you think about it is one of the iconic American companies, when I said about trying to expose what I saw at GE, I reasoned right away that in the beginning some guy, who'd spent 4 or 5 years not working, comes up with the idea that maybe we should look at GE that has serious problems, will face tremendous headwinds inside the U.S. So what I did is I reasoned that I better go internationally first, and I convinced the Sunday Times of London, and England has a very strict approach that it takes towards writing analysis, stricter than the U.S. You don't have the same freedoms in England that we do here. And I managed to convince them to run with the story and got a lot of international focus on it, and that ultimately was crucial to getting this exposed. So similarly here, I reasoned that President Obama, at the end of the day, even if the IRS convinces itself to investigate fully the Clinton Foundation, and even if the Department of Justice gets involved, and even if people are put on trial, and even if they're convicted, the President of the United States can still pardon federal crimes. But here is a nuance that most people don't know. The President of the United States has no power to pardon state crimes, and no power, of course, to pardon foreign crimes. And when I found rampant evidence of state and foreign crimes, I decided, well, the right way to do this is to contact states and foreign governments, and I've been doing that, and I'm going to do more of it. One of the pushbacks that you get from states and foreign governments is, well, if this is so important, how come the IRS isn't looking at it? Well, now they are looking at it. So
the same IRS that had top-level officials step down for targeting political groups that they didn't fall in line with, that unbiased IRS. Well, why aren't they pursuing Hillary Clinton? Well, the writing seems to be on the wall.
Well, it's funny. I just spent today, you meet interesting friends, and I'm pleased to make your acquaintance. But the short version of the story is that I spent an hour again on the radio today with a wonderful woman named Utrice Lead, L-E-I-D, who works for the Progressive Radio Network, which is, not exactly my political persuasion. And but she and I and others in the progressive and certainly on the right, I've said to her, I'll say to you now, you're a fool in this country if you want to stand up today and defend charity fraud. I think we Americans can all agree that charity fraud is a really bad thing, and that for a former president of the United States and an aspiring president of the United States to be involved this actively, benefiting from charity fraud, and they have benefited personally, taking tens of millions of dollars of payments, which should not have been taken and which should have been disclosed and which haven't been appropriately disclosed in the charity financial filings, that this is disgraceful behavior. It needs to be fully exposed. It needs to be considered. And this experience needs to be used as a touchstone or as a warning set of signs so that President Obama doesn't come anywhere close to doing this in the future, and I suspect he won't, and that nobody, whether on the right, the left, the middle, or of no political persuasion whatsoever, gets so bold as to think that they can act as Robin Hood in reverse, in effect stealing from the poor to profit and become rich. And this is just disgraceful behavior.
Charles, I couldn't have said it better myself. Unfortunately, we are running tight on time. Charles, thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking the time to discuss this. And we can't fit it all in an hour. We just simply can't. So would you mind telling our listeners where they can find you, where they can find what you have discovered in this entire investigation from beginning to end? Go deeper into the details. Let these people know where the facts are that you have found and how they can get a hold of you.
Oh, thanks so much. One place is just my very creatively named website, www.charlesortel.com, O-R-T-E-L, 1L. And the other place actually is on Twitter. I find it may not be a great investment, but Twitter is certainly a useful tool. And I do my best to try to respond to people who reach out to me on Twitter. I'm my name again, at Charles, uppercase C and uppercase O, Ortel.
What an absolute treat to have Charles Ortel on. There are a lot of people that would like to have him on their program, and he agreed to come on ours. So thank you to everybody involved for making that happen. Again, we don't do interviews. We simply don't. But the fact that I was willing to have that interview, I hope tells you how important I felt it was and how necessary it was that we got this word out. But we're clean out of time. We threw the brakes out. We're moving on down the road, and we are clean out of time. We'll keep you updated on this story. DNC tomorrow. Remember, in the words of the great Ray Wiley Hubbard, on the days I keep my gratitude higher than my expectations, well, I have really good days. I hope you have a great day. For the great Ron Phillips, I am Gavin Mitchell. And, hey, thank you, Matt Locke, for what you did yesterday. I mean it. We'll see you tomorrow.